Hello, everyone. I'm Sarika Jain, and I have one question for you. Who here is heartbroken? Great. Well, if you are heartbroken, I urge you not to waste it. I'm heartbroken. It was January 27th, 2012, and I was on top of the world. I was going to marry the man of my dreams. He was everything on my list. He was tall, successful, 5 years older than me, a doctor, an Indian. He was perfect. And I was doing well, career-wise. I graduated from a top business school, and things were set. That morning, though, he called me, and he said, "Sarika, I need to see you." Now, given that we were doing long distance, I got a little anxious, but I decided to show up my beautiful best, and I wore a nice white cashmere sweater, nice and elegant jewelry, and I showed up at this upscale Mexican restaurant where we were supposed to meet. And as soon as we sat down, he looked straight into my eyes, and he said, "Sarika, I'm sorry, but I cannot marry you. You have deep-set psychological issues and control issues, and I just don't trust you." I was completely shocked. But during that lunch, I pretended like everything was okay. I pleaded with him to not waste this relationship, this investment of time and love and energy. We were going to have a great life together. But he left New York. And that evening, I went home. And I was just shocked and yet confused. I mean, I know the therapist had told us that we both had issues. But I didn't think that I had psychological issues. That night, a voice emerged from my heart that said, "Sarika, you need spiritual healing." Now, being a logical MBA, I had no idea what that meant. So the next day I went to work, and my colleagues were like, "What are you doing here? Go home." So I decided to go to my favorite Indian restaurant and gorge on a huge lunch buffet. And then I started walking around aimlessly, not really knowing where to go next. And then I saw a sign that said psychic in golden blinking letters. So while my logical mind was like, "What are you doing? Don't waste your time and money going in," my heart and body wandered in. And there I met Pat, a Romanian gypsy psychic, who told me to sit. And she told me exactly what was going on in my life right now. She recounted word for word who said what, who did what. And she said, "I hate to break this to you, but your heart and your sacral chakras are shutting down. And if you don't start doing some energetic healing right now, your life is going to continue the same." And honestly, I was sick of my heartbreaks. And I said, "That's fine, I'm going to do this." So the very next day, I started on this healing journey. And let me just say that it was the most difficult thing. I would cry everywhere on the subways. My sheets had like mascara stains all over them. And I watched as the fire blazed inside of me of anger and despair and shame. And I wanted answers from God. I wanted to see a light at the end of this tunnel. And during that time period, I held myself and I said, "Sarika, I love you, accept you, and forgive you." And in that process, I continued to feel even more anger and despair. But I continued the process, and I did it with my ex and other people that were related to me or I felt had hurt me in some way. And then something magical happened. In a few months, I felt lighter. And I started to fall in love with myself. I started taking cool classes in energy healing and psychic reading, met a lot of interesting people. I used to hang out in parks and play with puppies and children, observe flowers, and I'd take myself out for lunches and people watch with myself and giggle. And then, 3 months later, something else magical happened. It was after our meditation sit, and a handsome man came to me. And he said, our friend asked us to speak. So, even though he met nothing on my list, he had just quit his nonprofit job and had a one-way ticket to Europe to do the Camino de Santiago. He was 5 years younger than me. And I was like, okay, let's hang out. So in due course, we just started listening to each other and holding space for each other. And 2 weeks later, he was off to Europe. And we wrote long letters to each other about what we were going through. And we just stood there listening as we each went through our own healing journeys. And then, 40 days later, he was on a flight back to New York, and he came straight to my apartment. It was then that the third magical thing happened. I allowed myself to fall in love with no expectations. It was beautiful. We would just listen to each other and have fun. It was a freedom-based love that I'd never experienced before. And we started creating a vision together of what we wanted to do for ourselves and for a better world. And then, a year later, the fourth magical thing happened. We got engaged in the Bahamas. And I was on top of the world. But this time, I knew that I had a lot of gratitude for my heart being broken, because it was in that time period that I could feel so much more pain, so much more suffering, and yet so much more compassion and happiness. And my heart was broken open. And I got to experience so much more fulfillment than I would have ever. So my friends, my message to you is, if your heart's broken, I urge you not to waste it. Thank you.